There it is. And we're
We're
live.
live!
Hey.
Almost on time. We're only 40 minutes after 7, but that's okay. We didn't publish a time this time, so we're fine.
Okay.
And it's Wednesday nights, and no one's going to expect it. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
It's a surprise. Or as a janitorial person would say when they jump out of the closet, supplies. Sorry. I'm a dad now. I have an excuse for dad jokes.
That's right. You got to have dad jokes now. You have a constant supply of dad jokes. All right. On that note, I'm going to play the intro music, and we're going to get the show on the road.
Sounds good.
Welcome to the Iron Sysadmin podcast, your source for IT news, commentary, and a healthy dose of paranoia. One of these days, I'm going to re-record that intro. I hate the way my voice sounds on it.
I think it's fine.
It's low. It sounds too low.
All right. I guess I can agree with that critique. But
yeah. Anyway. All right, folks. Welcome to episode 43, as I said in the intro. We're back. We're on a Wednesday this week, and we'll talk more about that in the announcement section. This may become a more regular thing. I got Dustin with me tonight. Say hi, Dustin.
Hola.
Jason had a family commitment, and well, we'll just say that I wouldn't dare take him away from a family commitment. Family's important, folks. Remember that.
Agreed.
So, guess we'll hop straight into the news, huh? Then we'll get it. We'll have our chat on in the announcements and chat section, huh?
Sounds good.
Did you hear what happened in the EU this morning?
Vaguely.
I mean, it's actually good that we're recording on Wednesday because this literally just happened this morning, and we wouldn't have had this info had we recorded Monday. Breaking news and all. So, according to Reuters, we've got Google has been slapped with a $5 billion antitrust lawsuit. Let that sink in. $5 billion.
And think about this. I mean, you talk about, the fallout of all these other security breaches, these companies get fined a couple $1 million and people think, oh, $1 million, that's a lot. Really, it's not. 5 billion, however.
Yeah.
Well, that's, those extra zeros kind of hurt.
Yeah, I mean, $1 million for a company like Google would be like, whatever. Here's the checkbook.
Yeah.
Or here's my wallet. I carry that with me just in case I get fined for antitrust in the EU. No, 5 billion. Like, wow, that's a whole lot of money. It's a lot of money. Now, the thing I'm not clear on is exactly what they did to bring this on, what Google did. It just says EU antitrust regulators levied a record 4.34 billion euro, which comes out to 5.04 billion fine against Google on Wednesday for illegal restrictions on Android smartphone makers and mobile network operators. So what that translates to, I'm not really sure. I'd love to know a little more about that. I didn't have time to dig into it, but I'm really curious what limitations Google would have put on smartphone manufacturers and network operators. I'm assuming they mean mobile carriers.
I would think so. I'm wondering if it has to do with if you get any of the non-vanilla Android phones, right? Sometimes HTC, for example, or Samsung or any of those different providers, they would actually pre-install like a lot of apps. And my biggest frustration when I was on Android was actually trying to uninstall all that stuff or not even be forced to use it. I'm wondering if it has something to do with that, because I know that still is an issue today.
But
Verizon or AT&T, there's stuff that they make you keep on your phone. Like, why would I want a navigation app for my mobile carrier, for example?
Or freaking what was the one Verizon was notorious for? NFL Mobile or something?
Oh yeah, of course.
I don't care about sport ball. I don't want this on my phone.
No.
But anyway, that sort of thing, while it's annoying, I don't know that it would be an antitrust thing, right? So if Verizon forced me to install NFL Mobile and prevented me from installing any other sports application on my phone, that I would call an antitrust violation.
Yep.
Having it there, but giving me all the freedom I want to install any other application, I just can't remove NFL Mobile. That's
okay. Like, I find that acceptable. You can at least
get
from running. If I can't uninstall it, okay, I'll take
right. So it's annoying because
Yeah.
I can't remove the app that I don't use and want to get rid of for space concerns or security or whatever. But it's not antitrust. I wouldn't call it antitrust. This, I mean, I almost think it's more like a smartphone manufacturer is only allowed to run Android, right? Instead of like, oh, well, I want to run, I don't know, pick any other smartphone operating system. Oh, wait, there is only one other smartphone operating system.
You don't want Palm OS?
Right. Yeah, right. Windows Mobile's gone now, right? I thought Microsoft did away with that. Palm OS, is that still around? I don't think it is.
I think it became HP something afterwards.
Okay, and then there was like Firefox OS or a mobile or whatever they call it. That's dead.
Ubuntu.
That's dead. So what do you got? iOS and Android.
BlackBerry runs
BlackBerry.
They BlackBerry now. They don't even run anything of their own outside of maybe some enterprise services, business services.
I thought, didn't BlackBerry switch to Android a while back?
Yeah, I just said that. Yeah, they switched to Android.
Oh, sorry, it cut out there. For some reason, when you and I at the same time, I override you. At least on my end.
I know I'm having trouble seeing you now, but maybe there's a bandwidth concern. I'm not sure.
Who knows? I hear a crying baby too.
Yeah.
It's a baby.
He's hungry.
So anyway, $5 billion. I don't know. That's the Google bottom line. It can't be good.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
I can't imagine any company $5 billion. Maybe.
Either. Although, it'll be interesting to see how they end up paying it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, right. So I don't know what happens after this. Like, can Google come back and go like, okay, I'm going to give you 4?
Probably.
Or is it like, no, $5 billion is it? You got to pay us the whole $5 billion. Because I know, like, there's always that thing about, oh yeah, well, you can sue somebody, but if they don't have the money, then you're not going to get the money anyway.
True.
Right, because you can't get blood from a stone. That old saying. So like, can Google just say like, oh well, you sued Google, and Google's a subsidiary of Alphabet, and Alphabet has all the money, and Google is actually broke. Like, is that a thing? Can they pull that card?
Well, I know they pulled that card in the U.S. with a couple of auto manufacturers years ago. They fell into debt, but that was a little different. But
yeah,
same idea.
So anyway, I don't know if that's what they're going to try to pull, but I'm curious if that is a thing that can happen or not.
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, we'll probably hear nothing else about it, unless like Google starts killing babies or something because of their $5 billion fine.
Yeah.
I hope they don't do that. That would be horrible.
Horrible.
So moving on from the Hacker News. It was the last episode or the episode before we talked about Gen 2's GitHub repository had been broken into, and some malware was added to the software that is included with Gen 2, some
call it extra features.
Extra features, right? Extra features. So there's an update to this now that some time has passed and people have dug into what actually happened. Apparently, the attackers got into the admin account for the GitHub account for Gen 2 by guessing the password.
Brute force wins.
I mean, it sounds a little more sophisticated than brute force.
Yeah, but
let me just see. There was a statement in here that said, it just says Gen 2 developers have revealed that the attackers are able to gain administrative privileges for its GitHub account after guessing the account password. But there was something here that talked about, they had said something about like a breach on some other site had given the attackers sort of like a base to try to start guessing passwords off of, and that's why it was easy or
Oh,
easier.
they were able to like gather, passwords from another system
Yeah,
and then try to
yeah.
use it as like a dictionary, basically. So they did a dictionary attack, essentially.
There we go. The attacker gained access to a password of an organization administrator. Evidence collected suggests a password scheme where where disclosure on one site made it easy to guess passwords for unrelated web pages.
Cool. Way to gather intel. I mean, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, right. Well then, but so the problem with the from the attacker's perspective, good for Gentoo, was that the attackers got in there and just like started kicking over trash cans and lighting fires, right? So they were noticed really quickly.
Yeah, see, that's the problem. If you're going to do that, if you're going to be a smart criminal, you have to be smart.
Yeah.
When you win.
Yeah. So the quote here is the attack was loud. Removing all developers caused everyone to get emailed. The Gentoo maintainers said, given the credential taken, it's likely a quieter attack would have provided a longer opportunity window.
Well, especially if you think about like if they were able to not only commit some changes, clean
Yeah.
the log to not show those changes, and then also update that MD5 for the actual compiled image that's being downloaded. I mean, they could have operated like that for a long time. I mean, look at all the projects that are affected on like SourceForge over the years, right? With
Yeah.
similar issues. If the quieter you are, the more powerful you are in that type of instance. I mean, good
Yeah.
thing
So
cloud, so people of Gen2 community were able to kind of respond to that as even outside of the developers.
yeah. So it sounds like the attacker got in there and started removing people's privileges from the repos,
Yeah,
and that got noticed. And they said within 70 minutes between quick action on Gentoo's side and GitHub's side, they were able to recover the account and I guess start remediation.
that's good. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it also says there was no two factor in place.
Which scares me. Like how could you? And I'm not beating up Gen2. I'm sorry. I'm not beating it. But as a provider of something that a lot of people use, how could you not take the right steps to properly secure that stuff, especially your bread and butter like that? I mean,
Yeah, right, right. Now this sounds like these attackers had to me, it sounds like they had a grudge. Like
oh,
they didn't like Gentoo or they didn't like the Gentoo team or something. Because some of the things that they did were like they added what it sounds like is they added like a hook to the Git repo so that when you were to do certain actions, it would execute the hook, right? You're familiar with this concept where like you can put a hook in a repo. Sorry, I
the web
can't hear what you're saying. I'm talking and you're talking.
the webhooks.
Yeah, well, I don't know about webhooks. It's like I don't know. I don't know enough about Git. I've never actually used this. I just know it exists. But this is set up so that like you would do an action in the repo and then the repo, or I should say Git, would execute an rm-rf.
Oh, that's fun. Oh yeah, that's right. That was in this article. Yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff is just mean.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I'm like, this is like somebody who doesn't like Gentoo's development team or something, right?
It's more than just profiting from a botnet.
Yeah. Yeah. This isn't I'm inserting a botnet in Gentoo Linux. This is like I want to screw over all the Gentoo users.
Now, what they could have done that would have been very smart is if they incorporated some kind of minor project into the OS. So base install. I'm sorry. That's sick.
Look,
But
it already takes like 24 hours to build a clean Gentoo system. Imagine if there's a miner built into it now.
I thought this was supposed to be like very lean on resource consumption. Wonder what's in this.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway.
All right, so moving on. I forget if we talked about it on the show or if it was just you and I chatting about this, but there was a discussion we had at one point about the fate of SUSE Linux.
Yeah, I know you and I talked about who owned it or who had interest in it. Fate. I don't know if that was on the show or not, or if that was with
Yeah.
one of your other co-hosts.
Yeah. So basically, I remember the last I remember of SUSE Enterprise Linux was we ran Novell at the place that I work, and Novell, of course, owned SUSE Linux at the time, and they had taken Novell's NetWare and retired it, and they had SUSE Enterprise Linux, what, SLED, SLED, no, SLES, SLES, SUSE Linux Enterprise Server, and they had like built a service that ran on top of it that was basically NetWare, right? Well, they got bought. It didn't look good. So we very quickly got off of NetWare and on to Samba, which is where we are now, which is a whole other conundrum, but whatever. Apparently, the company that bought them it's in the article here. Shipped multiple times, U.S. software company, blah, 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 blah. That was bought by Novell, the Attachmate Group. I don't know who named the Attachmate Group the Attachmate Group, but they bought SUSE Linux for $2.2 billion in 2011.
Where'd they get that money from?
I don't know.
Who
In their Attachmate.
Attached it. Wait.
Huh?
Oh, I don't know. I said they attached.
I don't know. I don't know how you pronounce this, but it's spelled just like I'm pronouncing it. Attachmate, M-A-T-E. Maybe they're Australian. I don't know. It says U.S. company. So. 3 years later, Micro Focus International acquired Attachmate for $2.35 billion. So, like, pretty much the whole value of SUSE Linux went into the purchase of Attachmate. That was in 2014. And now they're owned by a company called EQT? No, EGT. EGT. Yeah. So anyway, they've been purchased again, and this time the price tag was $2.5 billion. So the price of SUSE Linux is going up.
That's amazing that the valuation's that high. I mean, you talk about SUSE and its current adoption, or I should even say, just user base. I mean, I don't. Maybe it's just the industries I'm in and you're in it. It's not something I really have ever really talked with anybody about. It's usually CentOS, Red Hat, server.
So the article does list SUSE as a competitor to Red Hat Enterprise Linux and Ubuntu. Sure. I think that competitor may be a strong word in this case.
Yeah, I would agree. SUSE, we don't see it. Maybe we're in the wrong area. Maybe we're in the wrong part of the world. Big in Europe.
That could be it. That could be it. From what I understand, SUSE is more popular across the pond than it is here in the U.S.
Look at you across the pond.
Yeah, well,
Spot on.
So at any rate, for half the price of an antitrust lawsuit in the EU, you could purchase SUSE Linux. See how I tie that together? That's good right there.
Thanks to you, Nate. Thanks to you, Nate. The numbers are so lovely.
Yes. And for our last article of the night, this is from Slashdot. It links a couple other articles, as Slashdot usually does. It looks like the original article is from The Verge, but Slashdot has done a bit to summarize this. Apparently, a Republican... I neglected to see what office this guy holds.
Representative.
He's a there we go. He's a representative. A state representative from Colorado, Republican, has announced support for a bill actually supporting bringing back net neutrality.
Or in his words, codify.
Codify. So, I mean, in my mind, this is a step forward, and that's why I called it a win in the intro. It's not a win exactly, but it is a step forward for the fate of the internet. Unfortunately, regardless of where my politics lie, I do have to say that the party that I usually support, I disagree with pretty heartily on this issue. It seems that most Republicans are opposed to net neutrality, and I am most definitely for net neutrality.
As am I.
It's just one of those cases where I feel like I don't really identify with a party.
I don't either.
like 60-70% of my values seem to align with the Republican Party, so I I don't know. I don't want to get too deep into that because I generally try to keep politics out of this show.
Well, I
But
think would say the same thing because he would pick you apart if he said you were a Republican, you were a Democrat. He would say, well, what about all these other things? And you would probably respond saying, well, I don't agree with those things. He goes, well, then you're really not. You're nothing like me. And that's that. And I actually agree with his mindset on that. It's like, yeah, unless you're on top of the daily changes with your party and you're for every single change, don't consider yourself a single party anymore. It's too.
No, it's really too gray. It's 100%. It is too gray. That's kind of an oxymoron to say it's 100% too gray. It is absolutely difficult to say it's too gray. So at any rate, I guess you were saying you heard that there's a protest that's occurring. What would you say, tomorrow?
There's a national Fight for the Net protest or Battle for the Net, Fight for the Net. I forget which slogan they're using, but EFF, Demand Progress, those guys, they're having a national go to your local representative's office location and let's rally. There's actually one going on about 20 minutes away from where I'm at, so I actually may attend. First time I've ever done anything like that. But, as you are a supporter for net neutrality, I am too. In the years past, when it was being introduced, I was, very much involved asking my families to get involved with different things. I mean, even just, going to a website and filling out a form on their own behalf, letting, these different nonprofits take care of the addressing for them. That was something that I did to help get support for it. So, actually being able to be part of an event is pretty interesting. It's been a long time. It's been a long battle. I hope it, definitely brings out more awareness and shows a little bit, the amount of people that are very interested in wanting this to stay. But ultimately, I mean, you still have two more steps. You have the House, and then you have El Presidente. And,
oh, yes. There's a long, long road ahead, even if this does get traction. I mean, it's already suffered so many defeats.
Yep.
But in the current administration, which are unfortunately seem to be very opposed to net neutrality. I'm sorry, I keep trampling you. Go ahead, speak.
Oh, no, it's okay. It's okay. No, they are. They totally are against it. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. What is funny though, he's calling it the 21st Century Act, Internet Act, which if it does actually get approved and put in place, like 100 years from now, somebody will say, yeah, back in 2000, I hope it's 18.
Yeah, right.
The 21st Century Internet Act was put in place, and it's just people are going to shake their heads. It's just kind of funny. The time-specific titles. Anyways, that was my 2 cents.
Yep. So yeah, I think the real problem with net neutrality is that it's almost it's just so difficult to get people to relate this to their life
and to understand what's impactful. I mean, that's the big part of it. Like people just.
So I mean, take like any other hot button topic that gets so much support on one side or the other. Women's rights, abortion, gun control. Like these are all things that people can directly relate to things they're seeing in the news. Things they can relate to their own lives. And net neutrality is. I don't know. It's so difficult to convey to someone who doesn't get it or doesn't care why they should care.
Well, even if you look back, so when net neutrality was being put in place, Netflix was a big part of educating people on the importance of net neutrality, because Verizon was throttling Netflix experiences horribly, and it got to the point where so many people were actually canceling their Netflix subscriptions, and Netflix says, hey, it's not us, and to prove to you it's not us, here's fast.com, here's X, Y, and Z, and they even put a banner on people that had Fios internet or various Verizon internet connections, a banner saying, hey, you're on this network, this is throttled or limited by in this example, Verizon. Here's how to complain. And that was great to see them take action as a private company to help educate people and, show what is actually going on. And I think that was huge. But that's really the only example I've seen from a private company that offers a service like that. Like I haven't seen it, elsewhere really, other than, the foundations themselves trying to educate people. And even that's limited. That's a limited scope. You can share it on social media. You can do things like that, but it's not, not as publicly televised as other things. And it's on purpose. There's a lot of money involved with that.
Absolutely.
unfortunately, that money is, also, I don't want to say going back into places it shouldn't be, but it does, and that's what's really kind of involving a lot of pushback from all these big companies. And it's funny that a lot of the arguments that came out about, hey, it's been hard for us to grow with Title II regulations, it's been this and that, they actually looked at the metrics of that, and the major companies that were, complaining about lack of growth, they actually grew considerably in their customer base. So like, all these like, gut reaction ramblings are ineffective when the actual truth comes out and you actually have.
Yeah. So I mean, having the background that I do, and having worked for service providers, and having worked for basically where I work now is essentially a service provider, except that it's not a public service provider. It's more of a private thing, right? I can understand why a service provider would be opposed to net neutrality, because it's essentially the government walking in and saying, you can't throttle anything, right? And from a service provider's perspective, that's like, well, what if I'm throttling to do good? Like, what if I'm throttling a thing that is bad? What if I'm throttling a thing to improve the situation for my customers? Is that a violation of net neutrality or not, right? So now you're taking my choice away. But on the other hand, my end users, especially if I'm a public internet service provider, my end users, if they want to go to Netflix, or if they want to do that thing that I think is bad, but in their perspective is not, who am I to say it's bad or not bad, right? So like the whole thing gets a little gray when you look at it from the perspective of the service provider. But as the consumer, it's pretty black and white, right? I pay you for a service. I want to be able to do these things on the open internet by means of paying you for that service. And you're not letting me do that. Maybe because you're trying to protect me or your network, or maybe because a cable provider is lining your pockets. It's hard to say.
Well, and I think those are all fair points from both the ISP side. We understand the end user side, but from the ISP side, yes, that totally makes sense. I think the way it has to be structured, it has to be structured as like a framework and not an actual specifically outlined, this is the only way type of deal. And I think if that's the way this is being proposed, where it says, you can't do it to be competitive, like you can't use it as a competitive edge, but like if you're trying to reduce, people, like for trying to mitigate DDoS attacks, oh my God, there's all these DNS queries, like anything that's abusive in nature, or something that's going to reduce the experience for other users, or is malicious in one way, yeah, they should have the right to do that. But I think that the regulation or the outline should definitely give a more of a framework that these ISPs can model around and adapt with it. Yes, it's unfortunate that cost-wise, it's always going to cost them money anytime somebody has to follow regulation or compliance. Absolutely, but I think in this manner, if it's approached in a very well put manner and it's in the best interest of everybody, I think it's great. And that's where it should be. It shouldn't be biased towards the end user. It should be biased towards the company. It should be like right in the middle where it's fair for everybody. And I hope it continues. Otherwise, there's going to be uproar every time they try to do something like this, especially in the industry.
So, I mean, the problem is how, I mean, like anything, how do you make it fair for everybody, right? So,
I mean, just like
using my previous example, right? So, gun control. That's a really, really polarized thing, right? Well, I fall somewhere in the middle of the polarization, sort of like I fall somewhere in the middle of the red and blue spectrum, right? So I own firearms and want to be able to continue to own firearms as a law-abiding citizen who respects that these are dangerous things that I want to be able to own for sport, for protection, and well, I guess that's really the two things that are covered in my desire to own firearms, right? But I know it's obvious that there are people out there that will do harm with firearms, and I don't want those people to have firearms. So how do I craft a law that allows me to keep whatever firearms I think are reasonable? How do I draw the line as to what's reasonable? And how do I keep them out of the hands of the bad guys? Because there is nothing but myself and law enforcement to prevent the bad guys from coming to my house and stealing my firearms. And now all of a sudden they have firearms, right? So it's a really, really difficult thing to try to draw those lines. Net neutrality is a similar scenario. You don't want to put so much regulation in there that says, oh, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, or you can do that, you can do that, you can do that. And then inevitably, lawmakers and ISPs and the people who want to do bad with it find all the loopholes and they jump through them and they make it just as bad as it was.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's tough. Not only that, we have lawmakers who don't really get it.
No, they don't, and that's what even adds more of a challenge to this, is because they just aren't in that space. I mean, look back at the Facebook, we'll call it public audit, right? Of all these questions that all these different representatives or political, I don't want to use political, and I don't want to use representative. I want to use whatever, government officials, I guess,
Sure.
were on Facebook on, right? And a lot of the questions were redundant. And some of the questions, why I give some of the, people that were asking these questions credit for how detailed they got. But then when they started to get detailed and they got a very generic answer back, they didn't actually go into that any further. So it just kind of shows you that there is definitely, a certain amount of interest in understanding, but at the same time, there's definitely a lack of understanding that's involved. And I think that's the same thing goes with net neutrality, just like you're saying. And to add to that, you were comparing, for example, gun control, things like that, challenges of a law. Yeah, any law that includes technology, I think, is always going to be, technology and people are always a difficult thing to I don't want to say understand, but try to be in the best interest of protecting people, trying to be the best interest of protecting what that technology does, etc. And I think we're always going to have that challenge. There's good uses, there's bad uses, and unfortunately, putting a law around something is very difficult. I mean, even look at compliance, right? You talk about PCI compliance. PCI compliance from the consumer standpoint is supposed to make the consumers feel that their credit cards are protected, and it's supposed to make the industry stronger, and all these great things. But really, it doesn't really fix the problem, because companies still don't spend the money, have the interest to do the right thing, and if you're forcing it down somebody's throat, people are checking boxes, but it's not fixing underlying problems. Yeah, I have two-factor authentication on this, or yeah, I have this or that, but the other areas I don't have that PCI doesn't cover are now the weaknesses in my security plane, right? That's definitely what's going to lead to my next breach or compromise. And I was PCI compliant, though,
Yeah,
so
right.
It's kind of the same thing, I mean, obviously, different subjects, but it's the same idea. If you follow what I'm going after. Maybe I'm not making sense.
No, I get it. And I think I'm just going to try to get in one final thought. I think we should probably move on then, before this just turns into a show all about net neutrality. I really think that at this point, the way to solve the problems that we've just talked about, which is that the people in power don't have a good understanding of this, and they all seem to be sort of vested in.
Absolutely. There's vested interests. Always.
Right. They seem to be vested in making a choice that is not necessarily the right choice for the people, but the right choice for their lobbyists.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the proper way to fix this is to find a way to figure out who those people are and get them the hell out of office.
Yep. Well, and to be honest, I think there's a certain, and I don't mean to turn this, any more political than it is, but I think the representative government we have today isn't the representative government we need going forward. I think we
exactly. I think there are lots of flaws. There's lots of flaws in the system as it stands today. I don't know how to fix that.
Neither do I.
maybe nobody really has a clear idea how to fix that. But I think a good start is to figure out who these people are and get them the heck out of office. Don't let them get reelected. And I mean, I guess the only way we can do that is by casting our votes in a way that helps that.
Yep. And not cast your vote based on what you hear or read. Cast a vote on what you actually have looked into, because it is so easy anymore for companies that are lobbying people, what have you, sway mindsets based on social media, news, what have you. Do your own research. Be independent. It's a pain in the butt, but it's worth it. You feel better.
And don't vote your party.
Yeah, don't.
It's
please don't
like,
do that.
it's such a difficult thing, right? So, like, this past presidential election, I thought was the worst presidential election I've ever lived through. In my opinion, they were both two horrible candidates.
Agreed.
Like, how either of them got to the point where they could be running for president and actually have a freaking shot at the office, I don't know. Now, and maybe we'll get some hate over this, but regardless of which one I voted for, I think they were both terrible candidates.
You weren't a right fit. I would totally agree. I didn't vote for either party. I was one of those 5.5 million people or 5 million people that voted Libertarian to try to get a third party on the ticket next year, and unfortunately, we didn't reach the 7.5 million that we needed. So I'm not right. By any means. I like some of the views I have. As Nate said before, gray, right? I'm not either color. I'm just a contrast. So it was more of a strategic vote, but then it didn't really help anyways because there wasn't enough people that got together to even do that.
Yeah, but I guess the point I was trying to make is that people treat politics like they do football.
Oh God.
They like, I'm a Republican, I vote Republican, period. Right? Like, that's my team.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not your team. That's not how you need to treat an election. And I don't know how many people we're going to reach with this message, but I think more people need to hear it. It's just, I see it all the time on social media where it's I'm of a certain lifestyle, therefore I fall into the red or the blue category. And because of that, everything that the red or the blue party says is freaking gospel. And I am going to argue until I fall over from freaking asphyxiation because of my lack of breath.
And when you deal with those kind of people, I mean, even when I deal like in my life, it's hard to convey any points. I mean, it's it's really like unnerving and aggravating to me that there isn't even the ability to have an open discussion about that stuff. And it's so people don't even talk about it anymore. They're just like, oh, well, I guess I won't deal with that person. Well, that's a problem because now that person also influences other people. Mm-hmm. And it just, the numbers behind that is just, it's crazy.
I've got friends I still won't talk to ever since the most recent presidential election because they were so freaking outspoken on social media that I blocked them. It's that bad. That freaking bad.
It was a very big campaign. I mean, it was very, I don't even know what word to use, but it was.
And they were on both sides. Yep. There were people on both sides. I went into Twitter and I made Trump and Clinton blocked words. That's how bad.
Yeah. and even like the year after, it's, I mean, still so much.
Still bad.
Yeah. People who I wouldn't have even expected to make comments that they have, I'm just amazed.
All right. So I think we've delved far enough off the politics deep end. I think we're gonna move on. Okay, how's that sound?
Politics section is concluded. Where's the politics music?
Is that adequate? It's the only thing I have on the soundboard that seemed to fit. All right, I'm gonna play the real transition music now.
Deal.
I mean, there's always the Marvin the Martian kaboom that is still on the soundboard from like the second or third episode that I used it.
Earth-shattering kaboom.
Where's the kaboom? There was supposed to be an earth-shattering kaboom.
Sometimes I feel like that's where we're going.
Indeed. So, are we on to the main topic?
No, we're on to announcements. We talked. We'll try to keep this short so we can get into a main topic, and you'll understand why when I actually complete the announcements. So there's two things that are occurring that are currently in flight for the podcast. First, you'll notice that we're recording on a Wednesday instead of a Monday. This week, that was just sort of chance because Monday was kind of busy for me, and I didn't want to sit down and do the podcast. Didn't want to is probably the wrong word. I didn't really have time to, and I wasn't feeling up to doing the podcast Monday night. So we decided to move it. What's that?
Different priorities that day.
Different priorities that day. So we moved it to Wednesday, which actually turned out to be just as hectic as Monday, but I didn't want to postpone again. So here we are. But that led me into thinking we've been talking for a while about moving the show to Wednesday night anyway.
Yep.
Because it opens up the schedule of a guest we've had on the show before who expressed an interest in being a recurring host, a co-host on the show, but his Monday nights are booked pretty much every Monday. So we may be adding another host. I talked to him briefly about it today. He's a coworker of mine. You guys might remember when we talked to Charles about WordPress. So he may be joining the show as long as the schedule works out for him. And I think it will. I talked with him earlier today, and it sounded like he was pretty golden for it. So we may be adding another host. Yay! Yeah, right. So now we'll just have one more regular host. Which no offense to Dustin and to Jason, but you may notice that we've been having trouble getting all three of us together on the same night at the same time. So having four of us might mean, I don't know. I just think the show goes better when there's at least three hosts.
Agreed.
Or I guess we'll see how four goes. It might just turn into a shouting match. I hope not.
No, I think we all have a similar interest in things, but we also have different perspectives, and whether or not it's 3, 4. I hopefully not 2 anymore. I think it will definitely keep the show very lively, and I think it's good. I think we have a good balance of different perspectives across the topics we talk. So I think it's going to be good. I hope it works out.
Bigger shows like Paul's Security Weekly. I mean, they sometimes have 5 or 6 hosts on at a day, but they have a lot more experience at this than we do.
Yes.
And they may even have a staff that helps moderate. I don't know how the production works on the back end of that show.
You might. Well, hey, if we see him at DerbyCon, maybe we can ask him.
Yeah, right. Hey, how do you manage to make that work? Because whenever we have 6 people on, it's just a bunch of talking and no one gets anything in. No, right. So yeah, well, we'll see how it goes. I'm hoping it's not a problem. I don't think it will be.
I don't think it will be.
We'll see. I think it'll be good to have an extra person. Now, Charles, as you might remember, is not a sysadmin, but he does play a very operational role.
Just as important in the business.
Well, within our web team. And to be honest, the perspective of a web developer on this very admin-heavy show might actually be a good thing. So I think it'll be a good thing. Not just because we'll have an extra host to help fill in when someone can't make it, but just for more perspective. That's all. And well, whatever. We'll talk more about it as things get closer. But as it sits, leading into the next thing I want to talk about, Wednesday nights are probably going to be the show night from now on. And we're going to have a little bit of a more rigid schedule because I think so. We like to record the show live so people can watch and we can interact with you guys. But recording live means we need to sort of stick to a time slot. Otherwise, you guys don't know when to tune in. And sure, we've always said you should subscribe and hit the bell, and then you'll know when we go live on YouTube. But that doesn't help if you've got other plans, right? So you're not just sitting
like a burrito in hand.
Yeah, right. You're not just sitting around waiting for Iron Sysadmin to go live and join.
I am, Nate.
I know you are, right? I mean, why wouldn't you be? So to fix that, what I'm going to try to get us to stick to, and the time slot may vary. We tried to start at 7 p.m. tonight, and we ended up at about 20 to 8. So maybe we'll shoot for 7:30 or 8 o'clock. We'll fiddle with that. But at the very least, what I have hammered out is that we're going to be recording the show on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of every month. So there should be 2 shows per month, and it should be predictable, right? So recording every other Monday got to be predictable but unpredictable, right? Because it's always like, was there a show last week? I don't remember. Is there a show this week? What time was it at? Well, they say they're going to record at 9, but then they moved it to 6 and then 7, and they never start on time. And, so now if it's the 2nd or 4th Wednesday of the month, which you can set in your phone's calendar if you really want to get to the show, then you should hopefully find us recording live on those nights. Like I said, we're going to try to aim for 7. That might turn into 8. I don't know. It depends.
We'll see where it goes. I think having this will be great for us. It'll be great for you guys. All around, I think it'll be a benefit.
Yeah, tonight we had a technical difficulty or two, so we started late. That's obviously not the way it goes every night, unless Jason's involved.
Yeah. The man that runs beta in production.
Yeah.
It scares me.
So that's that. Hopefully, so that means that our next show, we're actually going to be technically missing a week. We're going to record again on August 8th. Should be our next show. That's when we're going to start the second and fourth Wednesday of every month thing. That's going to be our next show. It would have been next Wednesday, the 25th, but I have plans. So sorry, guys.
Thanks for thinking of us, Nate.
Yeah. And so the other thing that we're going to try to shoot for, and it looks like we're already running short on time for tonight, is we're going to try to start making the show an hour.
Yep.
Now, that has been hard for us to stick to in the past. Originally, I wanted the show to be an hour when I started it, but we always ran a little long, and then a little longer, then a little longer. And we've had some shows that are over 2 hours. And I just think that's too long for a podcast, guys. I did ask the listeners at one point, and the feedback that I got was all pretty positive, that they don't mind a longer show as long as it's filled with content. Unfortunately, some of our shows tend to ramble. And I think limiting the show to an hour will help cut that down. Now, obviously, tonight, I've already started rambling, and we went on for half an hour about politics. So it's a work in progress, guys.
That's okay.
But that's where we are as far as announcements for the show go.
Important announcements.
So we're going to keep the chat section to a minimum if we can tonight. You got anything cool going on, Dustin? Any cool projects you want to talk about or anything like that?
Well, I as I said before, we started recording. Changing our PCI compliance requirements is very nice. But for those of you who are in the PCI world, we have to do a self-assessment questionnaire, and there's various versions. I'll keep it quick. We had to abide by questionnaire type D, which is probably the most stringent of those levels as far as requirements and policies, etc. So going from that to the smallest level, A, is a huge win for the organization, a huge win for my stress, and that I'm really excited about. As far as like previous stuff we talked about, LDAP security, securing LDAP, it's taking its course. I've had to unfortunately move to other priorities, but it's still a work in progress.
Yeah,
limited resources, but that's okay. So that's about it. How about you?
So we're on the tail end of a pretty big virtualization infrastructure software update. I talked about it briefly on the show before, where we had actually brought in a consultant to help us get. It was more or less to help us be able to set aside the time. There's nothing quite like paying someone like $60,000 to come on site to let you focus.
Yeah. No,
right? Like, sorry, your help desk tickets have to wait. I'm paying this guy, and he's here for only 2 weeks, right? So, yeah, we didn't quite get to where we wanted to while the consultant was in, so I've been taking the rest of the upgrades sort of operationally. No downtime, no, like, major outage or anything, but we're finally getting to the point where it's almost done, and I'm very happy about that.
Hey, the big projects like that. When you look at it from the beginning and you start to do all the planning and try to cover every single stone that you come across, it can be mind blowing. And then when you're inside of it, you're like, oh man, when is this ever going to end? We run into this, run into that. Yep. At the end, you're like, I can't believe all that time has gone by. We've done all those things and we're successful. Yay to us! And you have to pat yourself on the back when you get through projects like that, because unfortunately, there aren't always a lot of successes. So when you deal with something complex and time consuming, be sure to.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean,
enjoy.
since February, and the failure which I caused that I talked about on the show earlier, a couple episodes ago, with our virtualization manager and the headaches that caused and the stress that it caused, I have to say that given everything that's occurred, all the stuff that we've been through and whatever, we've been through all the migrations, all the upgrades, all the updates, all the stress and pain with relatively low downtime, which is just surprising. It's very surprising.
Oh, surprising to you, because you're like, wow, like this is great, but at the same time, you almost don't want to admit that you're happy.
Yeah, right.
What am I missing? You know, it's like what didn't I do? What's going to bite me in the ass like 6 months from now?
Yeah,
And
yeah. No, I mean we've been pretty thorough with the whole thing, and I mean,
it's good.
I mean, I again, I don't want to get into too much detail because we did cover it in a decent amount of detail when I talked about the failure that I caused and how we migrated away from the problematic clusters. But some of the technical detail that I had to get into that the average user, the average admin even, is never supposed to see, right? You're never supposed to be this deep in this application, right? And the fact that we're through it, or through that part anyway, and we didn't lose any VMs, we didn't lose any data, we didn't even significantly have an impact to uptime. I mean, I'm almost afraid to say it because I'm generally a modest guy. I'm impressed.
Yeah.
I am impressed.
It's hard to be impressed sometimes with yourself and your involvements with things. It is.
Oh yeah. With your own work, it's hard to sometimes be impressed, but I'm genuinely like happy with how this is turning out, even though there was a point where I couldn't even eat. That's how stressed out I was. Yeah. That's a big deal for me. I love to eat.
I do.
All right, so I think that's enough for the chat. We can move along into whatever operational technology is, man. Let me get the music going.
Okay, get the music going. Need some reggae. If I was musically inclined, I would try to remix our theme and make it, various genres like that. That would actually be a lot of fun.
Get some like reggae metal. That's I mean, I actually like just a very brief aside. There's a guy on YouTube. I'm gonna butcher his last name because he's like Finnish or something, or Norwegian. He's Leo Marcavelli, something like that. He does metal covers of like pop songs and classic songs and like all kinds of stuff, and it's really good, especially if you like heavier music. And months ago, I reached out to him to try to see if he would record us an intro, and he just never got back to me. So I'm kind of depressed about that. I didn't try really hard. I could probably try again, but whatever. I thought it would have been cool. Maybe we could get him to cover something ridiculous in metal and have that as our intro.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. So, you had brought up the idea of this topic. You gave me a very brief primer before the show where you want to talk about operational technology, and it does sound interesting, but I'm going to tell you that I don't know a lot about it, and it's pretty much going to be on you. So, figure out how you want to approach this there, Dustin, and don't let me down.
I'll try not to. So it and ought. You say, what are you talking about? Are you okay? What verbal garbage is coming out of your mouth? So everybody knows what IT is, right? Information technology.
Of course.
OT is the operational technology. So when you think operational technology, you think, what are you talking about? Okay. In the manufacturing space, which is where I'm at again, operational technology would be things like the sensors, the computers, the things that make your machines make products. Those particular pieces, also the IoT space, they can be considered, are what we're talking about. We talk about operation technology. So you talk about like a machine that bends metal, for example. It has a program, right? That program most likely is proprietary software. That software may run on an OS, and that OS runs on a piece of hardware that talks to other myriads of hardware across the board, and that all comes together to give you a product. So it provides the safety of the machine for shutting down when things happen. It provides uptime, maintenance windows. Think of like a printer, for example, LaserJet printer. Those of you who have ever worked on a LaserJet printer or serviced them, there are many pieces of it, right? Even 10 years ago, laser printers had firmware, right? So you have firmware that's responsible for interpreting print jobs, maintenance scheduling, whatever, temperature control, tons of different things. You also have the mechanics behind it, and then you have all those sensors that detect the paper path. So there's things called gates in a printer. A piece of paper will go through various gates through a paper path before it actually comes out with a finished document. And those gates say, okay, where is the paper at? So when you're on a computer, when you're on a printer and you have an error that comes with a paper jam and the screen says, unjam in this particular section, that is thanks to sensors and the software knowing, hey, it's probably this. So, if you ever have this condition where some things are on, some things are off, this is most likely the case. So looking at that from a very simple view and applying it to the manufacturing space, right? The operations space, it's a little more complex because you have to deal with, the safety aspect of it too. You don't want people getting mangled up. So when you talk about operational technology as a whole, you're talking about those machines that are being driven by common technology that we will interface. So IT is always been the business side, right? You talk about the business services, you talk about making sure those services are reliable, making sure they're always available, making sure that, they're protected and it's in the best interest of the company itself. Going down the path of operational technology, you're kind of reinventing the same wheel, but applying it to a different arena. So as I mentioned in a very brief, undetailed example, these machines that have a computer inside of them and have all these different things running software, you have to protect that. And in this golden age, you also have networking that's involved too. So you may have heard of the term industrial networking. Ever heard of it? Anybody ever throw that around? You ever wonder what it is?
I can jump to what I can imagine that probably means, but yeah. So like a network of machines instead of a network of software.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah.
And you incorporate hardened pieces of hardware, meaning things that are rated for dust, water, extreme heat, etc., to provide those services for those machines. But you're not really like reinventing the wheel completely when it comes to like the protocols you're relying on. There's still TCP/IP. There's still a myriad of other technologies that we leverage every day. But now you're involving a manufacturing process. So whereas business services, downtime costs money, especially when you're using like an ERP or any type of SAP Oracle solution to run your business and conduct business every day. A downtime in that type of system is huge. It's impactful. Your whole company could be running on that single platform within different applications. Well, in the operational technology space, it's the same thing. Hey, you have a floor of machines that do all these things, and let's say the network crashes. Right now, you can't do any type of preventative maintenance and keep track of outputs. You can't tell maybe other machines to run a similar program because you can't pull that program anymore because the network's down. The network location for that particular recipe is inaccessible. So now you can't run that job anywhere. So those are some examples. So let me back up because I know I'm getting really deep into the rabbit hole. The problem that a lot of manufacturing facilities in the U.S. have, especially smaller, medium businesses, is they don't have a lot of the enterprise data center designs or implementations for their business services. So when it comes to the operational space, I mean, that's even more neglected. You can walk into manufacturers where it's like a museum, right? You'll see, one machine that has a purpose that's running, a DOS operating system. As its underlying support for the program that actually instructs the machine to do different things, and it could even be something completely proprietary. But you look at that and it's like, okay, how do we leverage that for analytics? How do we interface with that machine and look at like temperatures of something that moves, or even like we something that you and I would be familiar with, like the fan output, cooling capabilities of keeping particular components cool. You need to be able to see when that's happening and try to get a grasp on some type of preventative measure to prevent that machine from going offline, whether it be like like what you and I would do with a hot swap of a component. That space can also be leveraged for that as well. So you're minimizing the amount of downtime you have and being as proactive as you can be when it comes to always having something that can deliver a product, right? So you can compare operational technology in the manufacturing space to IT business technology. like an email service provider, right? They have a responsibility, a fiduciary right to provide email services. You're now applying operational technology in a similar fashion when it comes to safety, maintenance, analytics, even utilization, right? If you're familiar with cost control when it comes to printing, right, in a business, there's solutions like PaperCut, Xerox has their own stuff, etc., where instead of beating the heck out of one printer for a particular print job of whatever you're printing as a business, you can reroute those jobs to another machine that's not as utilized or underutilized or has a different cost rate or what have you, and try to recover costs that you wouldn't typically do based on just performing the same job every day. So when it comes to utilization and trying to be more fickle. I don't want to say fickle. Fickle is not the word. Being more intelligent with your spending, you can do things like that as well. So you can say, oh, well, this machine has an output for this particular part at this level. This one has at this level, but we can use less power here. Or, I mean, there's, as you can imagine, with any type of quote unquote big data. I hate that word. Big data scenario.
Big data.
All that metadata you have, you can leverage it for different things. So you're now starting to see the operational technology space do the same thing. So if you look at like Splunk, for example, for logging, you can set up logs for whatever you want from a particular host. In those logs, you can extract whatever. Well, you can do the same thing from the operational technology space. So you could say, okay, this machine, when we run this part in this program that was created by a human, is able to output, let's say, 500 parts an hour. Well, we're now seeing that there is some variable with a particular component that is just not expected, whether it be it being too hot, whether it being not fast enough, or not being programmed in the most efficient manner. By looking at the statistics and the actual history of what you're doing in that current production program, you can now make your production higher. You can produce more product by looking at trends and looking at a lot of the same things we do in the business side of things, like, hey, we have to provision a bigger circuit, or hey, this hardware isn't fast enough, we need to do this, etc. The OT space is starting to do that, and that's not just thanks to the maturity that's going into a lot of these programmable logic controllers, these different components that are used in that space. It's also looking at like what we're doing in the business services, where IoT is going. When you talk about the IoT of things, anything that has a network stack for whatever reason, it's like a myriad of all these different I don't want to say solutions, but capabilities, and just trying to, I don't want to use the word modernize, but kind of focus in a space that doesn't really have that much insight. I don't even know really what words to use for that, but it's basically taking the antiquated ways of doing things and being more I don't want to say involved, but capturing things that you wouldn't typically capture. And I know it sounds very vague, but if you think about, and I guess it's easy for me to think about because I'm in that space, but if you think about being able to make more of something faster and cheaper, and with a very little investment, and being able to leverage a lot of the same mentalities you have from a business services side and the operational side, it makes sense from a business perspective.
Yeah, well, that really harkens back to what we talked about in our DevOps episode about quick deployments, failing fast, and recovering quickly. So yeah, same concept.
Same concept. So, and I know I went all over the place in the beginning, but like talking about pulling a particular program for a product you're making, right? The biggest issues that you've had in the antiquated world of manufacturing that started to adopt technology, when it comes to like a computer with Windows 95 on it or DOS, how do you back up those programs, especially in a modern world? I mean, the place I'm at, there's still a few of those machines left, and I kid you not, we purchased tons of floppy disks. You may find it funny. We purchased tons of them when they were really cheap, and because of the fear of them not being manufactured anymore.
Yeah,
that the media that was used to back that stuff up, and we still have USB-based floppy disk readers because that's the way to go. That was the way to go about it at the time, right? So now getting
how else would you back up a DOS machine?
You could image the drive.
It's like floppies, tape drives,
like
OS native backup clients. They're going to expect removable media like floppies and tape drives.
And especially in this world where, you know, we have to be as cost savings as possible and try
Yeah,
to,
right.
you know, most profit, like it's definitely a challenge. So when you start going into the more modern side where you're eliminating the computer and strictly using what's called a programmable logic controller, those devices have, you know, SD cards built into them now. They have networking capabilities. And the point of this standardized technology being used is to make it easier for those types of challenges, backing up the programs of a machine when it comes to like how the machine actually works, you know, all the different applications that are developed for that machine to, you know, make it actually quote unquote work, you know, making sure that you know, when you're doing a particular activity, that all those different components come together and produce, you know, the results from that activity. So they're starting to leverage, you know, the networking to say, okay, well, now we can network all these digital sensors together. Now we can network other machines together. We can give you you know, the ability to back up your recipes, your product recipes for making a product. So if that machine goes down or you edit it on one machine, you can instantly pull it, you know, down the line somewhere else and load that same program if you need to increase the output. So I mean, like gone are the days of having to do that stuff manually, but because you have that convenience, now you have to properly secure it and properly, you know, the services around it to make sure that it can be used at all times. Otherwise, you are directly affecting, you know, production.
Yeah, so I'm just the more you talk about these machines and how they do manufacturing, I know a lot of people that work in IT may have trouble correlating this with the real world because, I mean, I don't want to put IT down, believe me, but a lot of us we work with our hands, but not to the extent of a manufacturing plant, right? Where I'm a little unique in that I feel like I don't want to call it manufacturing, but I do fabrication when it comes down to like Jeep things and whatnot, right? Because that's my hobby, right? Now, I'm sure I'm not the only sysadmin that has some experience with a welder, but I can really, in my head, correlate what you're talking about here because I know that there are machines that will automate things that I'm doing manually because I don't have the money to go buy a CNC machine or, you know, a computer controlled lathe or, you know, a bender or whatever, right? But I can see the stages here as you're describing them, right? So like me, when I'm in my garage fabricating things, I'm working with grinders and hacksaws and like sawzalls and whatever to cut things, hand cut things to, you know, metal or wood or whatever to the size and shape that I need, and then attaching them together somehow, whether it's with hammers and nails or glue or you know, a welder or whatever, right? And it's all very manual, which means that whenever I'm done with a product, if I were to try to replicate that product, it all comes down to how precise me and my flesh can be, right?
Yeah, and to go off of that, Nate, and this I can already give you an example, a real world example of that. So you talk about CNC and lathe machines, right?
Yeah.
In a manufacturing company or any place, even just you know, tool companies that do these services for other interest groups, they have gotten to the point where everything is, you know, CAD based, computer aided drawings, right? So whether it be AutoCAD, oh God, what's that big one? That other big competitor to AutoCAD. 3DS. I can't think of it. Anyways, whatever.
3ds Max.
That's Autodesk, but there's something
else,
not Synergis. I don't know. There's another big competitor to AutoCAD. Anyways, they're the big innovators of the 3D stuff that AutoCAD has reinvented in their own product now. But you look at like you know, what's involved. So let's say you want to make a part, right? You want to make a product. In the manufacturing space, you have to have a machine to do it, and depending on how you're making it, you may need to also make parts for that machine. So even though you have a drawing from your engineering department of what this good is going to be, this product, you now need to make sure you have all of the capabilities to actually produce that. So they'll take a drawing like that and then turn that into a program for like you know, tooling, right? And that tooling will model out what's involved for a particular machine to actually make that product. So all of that tooling that's required to make that product, you now have to make. So you take that a step further, have you know, drawings made for the type of tooling that you need to always replicate. And now that drawing actually becomes a program in a CNC machine or even a lathe. So you'll actually take that out of what was created by an engineering department. There's tools that will actually aid in writing all of that code for a particular machine type, brand and model, and then that can actually be pushed to that machine to run a program to create that tooling.
So you have your tools creating tools, which your tools will then use to make your product.
Correct.
That's just like very recursive there.
It is. And you can even take it a step further, and you can simulate all of that. So, like a big issue, in that type of area when you're trying to create tooling and things like that, is waste, right? So you have these, raw pieces of metal that are hardened and have different carbon levels, and it can be expensive, right? You don't want to chew through it, and you don't want to waste it. So, and I can't think of the name of the software I was trying to think of before. They actually have the ability to simulate what your CNC or your lathe will do, or even your EDM machines, any of these manufacturing tooling machines will actually do to material before you actually do it in real life, and you can simulate the hardness of the material. So it's gone so far down the whole of just capabilities. It's a completely different world where it was 10 years ago, and it's changed so much, and it's still evolving as IT evolves and the business systems become more mature and solve these issues, and yes, definitely becomes more complex, but becomes more reliable in how you structure things. That side is also changing. And what's refreshing to me is seeing companies like Rockwell and Rockwell Automation, big PLC manufacturer, many things for the industrial equipment world, starting to propose and talk about having serious conversations with manufacturers to structure services to support the operational side of things in a expected data center enterprise way that we do with our business services. It's kind of cool to see that. It's cool to see that, we're starting to look at, the risk of running these things and all that's involved to make sure that they have the utmost uptime. And then, using a lot of the same technologies we use for our business services in that space. It's really cool. It's really where it's going.
Yeah. So, I mean, to just sort of finish my analogy from earlier, right? So,
sorry.
If I want to, if I want to take a piece of steel and make I don't know, a bracket out of it, right? I need to figure out the dimensions of that bracket. I need to take my piece of plate steel and lay it down and draw the bracket with like a Sharpie or a wax pencil or whatever, and then I cut it out using something like, I mean, if you want to take the process all the way back to how things used to be and how they are today, you start with like, oh, I've got a hacksaw, and I cut out my bracket with the hacksaw, which is a real pain in the butt because it's all manual. There's no electricity even involved, right? And then it's like, oh, well, now I've got a jigsaw, or I've got a sawzall that'll do this, or I've got a die grinder, right, that I can cut through steel with, right? And for someone like me who doesn't have a manufacturing shop, that's probably fine. It's time consuming. It might take me an afternoon to get that bracket just right, but I only have to make one, so it doesn't matter, right?
That's the big point. You're making just one, and you're fine.
Right.
Another, you can accept the variances. Not a big deal.
Right. So then things progress to the point where it's like, oh, well, instead I have like a water table machine that can cut through steel with a jet of water.
Yeah.
But I have to control it by hand, right? So okay, I draw the process is still similar. I draw out my thing, I put it on the water table, and then I guide the jet to cut out the thing, right? Mm-hmm. And then it goes a step further. Well, now I figure out that if I put motors and servos in place of the human, I've got a water table that I can control with a computer. And now things get complicated because that computer isn't just a person. That computer is a piece of technology that needs to be patched, and it needs to be protected, and it needs to be maintained, because if that computer fails, your water table is useless.
Correct.
So yeah, and then you go a step further and network the damn thing so that it can talk to other water tables within the same place, and you can push plans out to a dozen water tables at once, so you can increase your production exponentially.
It's the amount of complexity that you can go, like the road of complexity, I like to say, is never ending. There's so much. There is so much to deal with when you start incorporating like that. And that's why like IoT is such a big thing, right? Like, oh, my lights are networked together. I have to, my light actually shuts off when I have to do a firmware patch, right? I don't have these lights. I'm talking in theory. I wish I had, but it's the same idea. I mean, you're relying on it, so you have to protect it. And it's really something that I don't think has ever really had a true spotlight shined on it up until recently. And it's like, yeah, that's
and
things, but we need to properly protect them and properly use them, stand them up.
The whole thing might sound silly, right? So like I've got a light bulb that's internet connected so that I can control it from my cell phone. Like, okay, that's cool, right? It's neat technology. Well, until somebody breaks into my light and makes it flash at 2 a.m. and then it wakes me up and I'm angry. Or, I don't know, they join it to a botnet. I don't know if you can do that with a freaking light bulb or not. But I'm sure if it's running software, it's a possibility, right?
That's right.
So take that and scale it up to, this is my CNC machine, which is my company's bread and butter, because we make widgets and the widgets have to be produced every day. Otherwise, we fall behind. Now somebody breaks into my CNC machine and I can't make widgets.
Or even a step backwards, somebody compromises the computer that loads those programs into the CNC, like the separate engineering piece of it, and now I lost all my drawings, or
right. I work in manufacturing, and someone stole my proprietary plans for that widget that I make, and now some company in China is making an exact replica of my widgets for a quarter of the price.
And it's sad, but that does happen. I mean, outside of, we talk about reverse engineering in our space, hacking, right? The same thing happens with manufacturing. I mean, Chinese companies have the cheaper labor advantage, and they are able to throw as many people at a problem and replicate, the same thing, or even, create a solution for something that is, already good, make it better, and just kill people, just kill other companies. And it's unfortunate. It's good for them because they have the ability to deal with that type of problem and also be dirty and steal things. But it's amazing to see how they can do that with people, and yet, we struggle sometimes doing it with from a pure technology standpoint. Like, look at big data, for example, right? I mean, that's not a direct comparison, but you think about trying to leverage a lot of stuff for a lot of hardware for a lot of data or whatever. I mean, this is very, very vague. It's kind of the same idea. The more you have to throw at it, sometimes it makes things easier. In manufacturing is the same way, Yeah,
well, I mean, manufacturing has got to be a difficult trade to protect to begin with, because
it is.
I mean, if I get, I don't know, going back to my Jeep thing, if I go back, if I buy a product for my Jeep, right? Generally, that's going to be like a thing that was cut from steel, so it would fit on my Jeep, and I'm provided install directions to put it on my Jeep, and I follow the directions, and it's on my Jeep. Given some curiosity, I could probably inspect the thing that I purchased with a fine-tooth comb, figure out how it was built, and build it myself. Depending what it is. If it's a complicated machine, like I can't build an engine in my basement. But if it's, something that was cut from steel and welded together, there's a pretty good chance I can replicate that. It might not look as good, and it might take me 20 hours to do it, where it takes their machine and their process and their engineers 20 minutes, right? But the bottom line is I could replicate it, and in doing so, I have then essentially copied their product. Then if I try to sell it, obviously I've broken the law. But simply copying it because, like, say my buddy bought a thing, and I looked it over really closely, and I thought, I could probably build that. And then I build my own. That company lost a sale. Because I built my own instead. But in that community, that's like, whatever. One guy, I lost one sale.
Yeah.
If I've stolen their CAD drawings and I'm a manufacturing plant and I can just feed that CAD drawing into my equipment, now I can produce that product as quickly as they do.
And it's very easy. I mean, it's a very easy thing when you have all of that data, all the necessary data to produce a component. You're done. I mean, you talk about, like, we've talked about 3D printing in the past, right? 3D printing is a huge additive to that. Yes, you can only really print in certain materials now. In the future, things that are steel based, what have you. A lot of these specialized machines that you have that have been around for like decades, it's older than you and I. You're going to see a lot of that disappear, and that's also going to make it harder for businesses to produce a product that's proprietary because they don't have a proprietary machine producing it anymore. Now you think, okay, why would a business want a proprietary machine? Well, if they have a machine that's proprietary that they can make their own tooling for, it's their machine, right? And the process is even more of a complex and specialized thing to do. And if they do it the right way, they can do very well. But when you eliminate that and make something that's standardized and easy for anybody to use, you now have taken even more of that competitive edge away. Now, at the same time, you've made things easier, right? For people who want to get into that space, maybe even for the same manufacturer, they can offload the resources to maintain that stuff and do other things. So yes, it is beneficial, but at the same time, you're now opening that up for people to basically do the same thing at home. And that kind of changes, everything. I mean, that's where you start selling, those drawings.
Yeah.
Or
so
it's crazy.
I think the manufacturing space today is at the point where it's not so much, am I the only one that can make this? It's, can I make it cheaply and quickly enough that no one else is going to bother to try? Well,
and the other side of it too is the brand. I mean, just like, we talk about security space, like protecting the brand, even more vital is in that space. So your product has to definitely have a good brand following too, and it's just interesting. I don't know where manufacturing is going to end up in 20 years. I know the next 5 years are interesting. The last 5 years have been interesting. So we'll see. It's definitely going to evolve. I don't see it staying on the same path, just like anything else. But who knows? Who knows what's going to come out of it? It's definitely interesting.
Yeah. All right, so we're coming up on almost an hour and a half already, even though we said we were going to go an hour. So,
I have nothing.
You have any final thoughts, or is that pretty much it?
That's pretty much it. This is it's just something I wanted to kind of just talk about the basics of. We're getting more involved with it where I'm at as well, so I'll definitely have more real world experience when we start getting even further into the meat of things, because they are modernizing a lot of their machines. That's the cool thing about the newer technologies now, is you don't have to buy a new machine. You can just retrofit the components and basically work with a sensor that's for 40 years. You're just interfacing it into a different device. So to modernize and actually get this information, when we talk about like statistics and different things like that, it's now much easier to do. And it's much more of a justification to do it because of the cost savings instead of having to buy a new machine. So that's the interesting thing about it too, is you can evolve existing machines for the most part that have been, let's say a DOS-based computer for years. You can remove that completely, interface with all those different sensors and gadgets, and basically recreate the same process but with newer components and save some money. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, I think we will call it a close for tonight then. Folks, like I said, we're trying to get on a better schedule, but still, it'll benefit you if you want to watch us live to go subscribe on YouTube and hit that notification bell so that you'll be notified when we go live, because regardless of how tight of a schedule we want to stick to, things happen, right? And there's going to be times when we start late or early, maybe. Who knows? Depends.
But
so, yeah.
Like either. That's a big thing too. If you like a particular video, give us a like. If you hate it, give us a thumbs down and tell us why.
yeah, and feel free to comment on our videos. Any sort of feedback is great, whether it's positive or negative. We just like to know what people like and don't like about the show. If you want us to go back to 2-hour ramble sessions, then feel free. If you want the show shorter, let us know. Or if you want to see us cover a certain topic, we've, between me and Jason and Dustin, we've got lots of experience in the field, and I think we'd be hard pressed to find a topic that we couldn't provide at least some insight on.
Agreed.
So yeah, that's all good stuff. We'd love to hear from you guys about what you'd like to see us cover. So yeah, the usual outro. You can find us on Slack, and you can find us on YouTube, and you can find us on Apple Podcasts, and you can find us on Google Podcasts, and like all the places you find podcasts. We got links to most of that stuff on ironsysadmin.com. Including the Slack workspace. Feel free to join in. We've had a couple conversations lately We have some nice segregated channels in there to talk about different subjects within IT, and some people have found that useful. So yeah, come on over. We'd love to hear from you guys.
Come on down.
Yep. And with that, I think we are going to call it a night. If you'd like to find us on Twitter, look for @IronSysadmin. You can search for us on other social platforms. We're also on Facebook, and I think that's it. Maybe we'll start a Diaspora pod one of these days. If you want to find me to chat with me on Twitter, I am @Gangrif, GANGRIF. And Dustin, you want to give away your super secret handle?
Super secret handle, Agent 66. 60 spelled out, the number 6.
Yeah, because that's like confusing as hell. So I don't know why you do that.
Yeah.
So, yep, I think we're going to call it a night. So good night, folks. Thank you, anybody who's tuned in on YouTube. We got a couple comments tonight that we had chatted with. And to anyone who's listening to us after the fact, we appreciate you just as much. So we will see you in roughly 2.5 weeks. So good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
All right, and with that, I think we're going to go off the air. Thank you, YouTube viewers.
Good night.
See you next time.
Go to your pets.